Hello and welcome to episode 148 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam,
I'm Sahil.
and it's been a while since we've had a good old-fashioned emergency pod like this one. I suppose you can't really call it an emergency pod. We're recording it 6 days late due to some scheduling conflicts. Recording it after episode 149, but that one will go out after this one. Just some weird scheduling around this, but we are here. Ronald Acuña has been traded.
But before we dive into those trades, I'd like to note that you pulled up a great tidbit last week. You sent this to me. Do you remember that we once did an emergency podcast when Lance Lynn was traded for Luke Voigt?
God. Yeah, that's a little bit less interesting than this one, I gotta say.
I mean, Lance Lynn was once better than he was now, and Luke Voigt was once relevant. Didn't he lead the majors in home runs in the fourth season? I'll pull this up quickly.
I think he might have, yeah.
You see, it's something like he had like 20 home runs in 60 games or something like bonkers like that. Oh, more than that. He had 22 home runs in 2020. So he averaged like a homer every a little less than every 3 games. Like that's like somebody hitting 60 home runs or close to it over the course of a season. Jesus Christ. But yeah, obviously this Acuna deal was bigger. It was followed up by a second big deal and was followed up by a pretty interesting third trade. So we
You
will
just said before recording that this trade is not interesting, but sure, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, you know what? I have to hype it up. They are two players I like. All right. Let's get going with the big boy here. We've been talking about this for a while. Ruthvik had we recorded a whole segment about the possibility of this trade that we or is never going to be heard by anybody, I guess. We're just gonna pretend it didn't happen. Deep Sea Devers traded Ronald Acuna, Ryan McMahon, and Cutter Crawford to Jake for Kyle Tucker, Bo Bichette, Jesus Luzardo, Seth Lugo, and Adele Amador. Cam, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's been this has been brewing for a while. I'm not sure why Ruthvik needed to trade Acuna. Um, I don't really get it. Um, but there were a lot of teams in. There were 5 teams that made an offer at some point on Acuna. Jake's original offer, interestingly enough, was the worst offer by quite a bit. And then it seemed like it was just kind of gonna be EBO, but Jake kept putting together better and better offers, and this is the one he went with. And I think, regardless of the next trade, I think Kyle Tucker had to be in this one um, for it to feel right. If Ruthvik had sent Acuna to Jake without getting Tucker back, that would have been a loss for him. But he did get Tucker, and he got Bo Bichette. Um, is a good piece. Luzardo, of course, a very good starting pitcher. Seth Lugo, I'm not fully sure about, and Dale Amador, really solid prospect as well. Um, I gotta say, it's a good return for Acuna. If he had to trade Acuna, I'm not the most convinced that Tucker isn't just um, almost as good as Acuna on his own over the next several years. And of course, Tucker's not on Ruthvik's team anymore, so that's something to talk about later. But I think, uh, yeah, Tucker is a top 10 asset on his own. Bichette is good. I like these pieces. And I guess for Jake, if you got a chance to make a crazy offer like this for Cunha, you got to do it.
Yeah, uh I also kind of have the question that you had. Why did Ruthvik need to trade Acuna? I think he's a little concerned about Acuna's knee injuries. He tore the ACL. He came back from that and obviously bounced back very well. But then he has been dealing with a meniscus injury this spring. It looks like he's fine now. At the time of the trade, I think he was day to day, but didn't seem to be super major. So I think that could be one reason. I don't mind the general concept of cashing out when a player is at his highest value, but I think Acuna can definitely sustain this. He's inevitably going to you know, regress a bit. And it's not a knock on Acuna. It's just he had such a bonkers season that like he's not gonna keep this up next year. Um, I think the real question for me is what is the difference over the next 5 years between Acuna and Tucker? And does Bo Bichette, Jesus Luzardo, and Adele Amador make up that difference? I don't know the answer to that question definitively. Um, I think some of it comes down first off to the speed, right? Like Acuna stole 70 bases last year. Is that sustainable with some of these knee injuries? Is he going to run less? Is something going to happen there? I'm not sure. I think he's going to be a little better in the power department. I think he's going to be a little, or probably about 30 points better in the OBP department. I don't know. I wish I had a better answer to it. I do think Tucker is arguably a top five dynasty asset, though. And I think if you're just purely looking at uh, kind of how things can vary over the course of a season, I think they're a little closer than last season would have suggested, especially because I think Tucker took a really nice step last year that kind of went under the radar. Um, but again, we'll see. I think Bichette is a nice ad for Ruthvik, but I do think the shine's kind of come off him a bit. I think he's more of a top 30 guy than like a top 10 to 15 guy. I know Jake had been chopping him quite a bit throughout the offseason. I've been hesitant to kind of try that reason, even though he is still ridiculously young. Um, I think Amador's a fine prospect. I know Ruthvik wanted Kobe Mayo. I was kind of hoping he'd get Mayo instead of Amador. I think that would have made for a better deal for him, but like Amador's fine. I really like Jesus Luzardo. I think he's a top 20 dynasty pitcher. I think he's a really nice get for Ruthvik. I will say, we have been talking about for Ruthvik here, like, kind of spreading out some of the depth a little bit. His team is like stars and scrubs, and this does spread out the depth as well as this next trade that he made, which we will discuss. So, um, if maybe having a more complete roster kind of helps him compete, I'm all in for that. As somebody who's kind of a believer in having more depth, I like it from that perspective. But man, I didn't see the reason to give Acuna up. I think on the flip side, we're talking about Jake's team, right? And Jake, later in the interview that we do with him, kind of mentions like, hey, like, this is something that Sahil's done, right? Is kind of take a bunch of depth and kind of accumulate it into a top asset. And while I do agree with that, one thing I try to pair that with though is kind of an understanding of, hey, how am I going to backfill the roster to kind of replace those players that I give up? And I think one of the reasons I was never super serious kind of on the Acuna front, even when I kind of threw out names such as like Tatis, Turner, Betts, Albies to Ruthvik, I never had a realistic expectation that he and I would close a deal, was because I understood like the secondary pieces I would have to give up in that trade would be just ridiculously hard to kind of fill in. Especially this close to the season starting, just let alone in general. And I worry in conjunction with the Strider trade if Jake gave up a little too much depth. And I know that he's not dealing with injuries now, or too many injuries, I should say. Corey Seager looks like he's been back early season. Devin Williams, I know he's going to miss a couple months. I'm really concerned about that back injury as a side note because, like, he hurt it in September. In theory, should have had all off season to rest it, and like now it's a bigger issue. Just as a complete aside, but if Strider's a pitcher, right, who throws really hard, if his arm gives out, we think, oh, some of these guys are so durable, it's never going to happen. I mean, look at Garrett Cole. He was the everybody thought he had a rubber arm and he got hurt, right? Or if Acuna's knee bothers him again, right? I think Jake could be in really big trouble, or even simply like, hey, like something flares back up with Seager because Seager never seems to last a full season. And, I don't know, maybe Michael Harris kind of slumps for a full season like he did for a good chunk of last year, right? Or JT Realmuto, somebody aging, right? Or Kevin Gosman's dealing with the shoulder injury to start the season. Like he's not going to start the season on the opening day roster. Blake Snell doesn't repeat last year, right? Like that's when I think you start to see, hey, some of the step gets tested, things can be a little bit of trouble. And not that I think that Jake is not perfectly capable of backfilling and figuring out a way, because I think he's a very smart manager, but it worries me. It's a move that I get for him, but it is not a type of move that I would be comfortable making without having more of a guarantee that I could backfill those spots.
Yeah, you went on about that for a long time. Uh, I get it, and I think um, looking at his team, I don't think his bench is like terrible looking or anything. Like Jack Sawinski's a fine guy to bet on, and I like Edouard Julien a lot. So it's not like he's trading away all of his depth and to pick a team at random. Uh, I was uh, gonna make fun of Eric's team, but I'm not seeing anyone particular worth calling out. But to he's not got. It's not like he's got some terrible guys on his bench because of this. Um, I think, yeah, it's really tough to trade that much depth, but I feel like he does kind of have the depth, and I trust him to pick up guys.
No, I agree that he had some of the depth to trade. I just like I I worry that the margin of error becomes thinner, especially in a world where I mean you're seeing like it feels like especially to spring training, just like the sheer number of players that have gone down is a lot. And I think you are kind of pushing your chips in on a couple of elite players continuing to remain elite and like not getting hurt, which the players that he's gambling on, I don't think it's not the worst gamble. I think it's still it's a very strong team. I mean, we ranked it number one in the power rankings, right? Like, uh, it's just not the way I would build my team because I would be constantly stressed about that depth and wanting to make sure I had it.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, so that was that first trade. Um, Acuna, yeah, I tend to agree. It's tough. I get selling high on him after the season he had. Um, but yeah, so Ruthvik acquired Kyle Tucker and then immediately went and traded away Kyle Tucker. Are we ready to talk about that deal?
Yeah, yeah, this one was really interesting. I went back and forth on this. So Ruthvik traded Kyle Tucker, Mackenzie Gore, and Yuki for Jackson Churio, Matt McClain, and Joe Ryan. Do you want to go first again?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I like that return for Ruthvik. I mean, Churi's a good get. Matt McClain is pretty good as well, but obviously now he's hurt and could be out for a little while.
You have to
If
assume a world in where he was healthy, though, if you're evaluating the full value of the trade, because there was no indication he was going to like miss the amount of time that he was at the time of the trade. I feel like I think it's only
that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. And Joe Ryan, I like a lot. It's tough. I just feel mildly underwhelmed since it's, Kyle Tucker. And I think, yeah, Tucker's a great get for EBO. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just find it hard. I mean, at a previous point, there was talk about this being a return for Michael Harris, and I would have thought that would have been great for Ruthvik if Ruthvik had gotten Michael Harris and then flipped him for this return. But with it being Tucker, it's a little bit more difficult for me.
yeah. Here's where I'm at with it. I think it's all going to kind of come down to Jackson Churio. And when I was talking to Zane, I think Zane was like, hey, we think there's like a 50-50 shot he's going to like break out. If Jackson Churio is what the hype says he's going to be, Ruthvik wins this trade because Churio is going to be putting up numbers similar to Tucker. And then you're adding on McClain, who's a very solid 25-year-old second baseman, and Joe Ryan, who's a very solid 27-year-old starting pitcher, who I think is a bit underrated because of how last season ended, which I attribute basically all to injury. That being said, it is really hard to kind of give up a guy who's a top 5 to 10 dynasty asset. I know Ruthvik called him a top 5 dynasty asset, so that's how he views Tucker. I think keeping Tucker would have been the safer thing to do. Churio is definitely a riskier thing to do. Um, I go back and forth on this because my first thought when I saw that return was like, damn, that's like a pretty big package uh, from a dynasty perspective for Tucker. But like again, I mean, I'm the type of guy who's all about consolidating depth, and this is kind of an instance here where I'm like, this is an appropriate consolidation of depth. And then talking about this from EVO's perspective, and in a now, I guess none of you are ever going to hear this because we're now recording over this. But I basically ripped into EBO being like, you've acquired like a gazillion picks and fun dynasty assets, all this. At some point, you kind of have to consolidate and cash in. Well, I thought they were going to do that for Acuña, but they ended up doing it for Tucker instead. And honestly, I kind of feel more comfortable for them doing this than maybe some of the stuff that was thrown out for Acuña for them. Because I don't think they viewed McLean and Ryan as kind of long-term pieces for them. I think that's very fair. If those are guys they identified. And really the only uncomfortable player they gave up was Churio. And, if Tucker is already what you hope Churio's like peak is, then hey, you got him, right? The guarantee. And the only difference was you gave up two pieces that you were kind of losing, that were losing a little bit of the shine to you. So I really like this from EBO's perspective because of how they value these players. I'm a little wary from Ruthvik's perspective just because of how much I like Kyle Tucker, but I do think Achurio hits. Like he got some really good value here and really kind of filled in his team here. I mean, if you look at Ruthvik's team top to bottom now, I think it looks a lot more impressive than it did before these two trades. And that's just because of the depth he's been able to fill in, even though maybe you can argue he's lacking that high end top piece now, other than Rafael Devers.
Yeah, I agree. And I definitely think you're right. EBO getting Tucker, it's a pretty solid way to consolidate talent, as much as it's not great for them to be without Joe Ryan. I do uh, like this deal a lot for them, and they're kind of surprisingly deep in starting pitching anyway. So I don't mind it too much.
Well, we say they're deep in starting pitching. Like 2 days after this trade broke, Yuri Perez that now has a mysterious elbow injury. So we'll see what's happening there. I
That
feel
is true, and
like
he was almost in this deal.
yeah. Can we talk about that too? It was basically either Yuri or Churio plus McLean plus Ryan. And I think Sully wanted them to include Churio, which is why they ultimately went with Churio, and Zane wanted to go with Yuri. And it, honestly, if both were healthy, I think I might have. I don't know how I would have answered it, but I because Yuri, my argument with Yuri would have been if we were having this debate before they both got or before Yuri got hurt, I would have said, well, he's still like a 20-year-old pitcher. There's bound to be some injury risk or something going on, but um, and it happened. So shit, I don't know, man. But two fun trades. We had such a quiet offseason, and all of a sudden, just bam, like top two players get traded, another top 5 to 10 dynasty asset gets traded. Like, um, Jesus Christ, man. Like, there we are. We're back, baby.
Yeah, I mean that Acuna for Tucker Teal that Acuna I cannot speak. That Acuna for Tucker deal. If we made another top 100 trades podcast, that would certainly rank high up on there.
Yeah, oh yeah. Those would be in the Acuna deal, especially. I think would be in the top five. I'd need to really think about what other deals would be up there and kind of their impact on the league. But oh yeah, um,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And lastly, JP Crawford was traded for Jorge Polanco. I like the Jeep. Uh, I like the Jeep better than Jorge Polanco. I think both of these guys are Mariners infielders. I don't think this is a big deal, really, but I think um, uh, I think Jake got a slightly better Mariners infielder.
Yeah, I love when the double play combos traded for each other. I think JP Crawford had a career year last year. I don't think it's particularly sustainable. That being said, Jorge Polanco has been dealing with some injuries, and I think there's some risk with him as well. Though I do think he does have a path to everyday playing time opened up, which he did not have in Minnesota. Um, Eric had no second baseman before this. He had Jake Cronenworth slotted in a second base slot. And or did I say Jake? Eric had no second baseman. I don't know if I said Eric or Jake at first. Whatever it is, Eric had no second baseman. He had Cronenworth. Jake had Seager on his IL, and nobody else slotted at shortstop. So, I mean, classic need for need deal. I don't think this moves the needle too much. Um, yeah, I like both players though. I've I traded for Polanco last year, or I've had Polanco on my roster multiple times at this point. I like him.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, that was the moves that were made. Couple big ones. Another trade also was made. Anything else before we get into our interview?
No, I thought a trade was gonna break while we're on the podcast, and keeps kind of being a little sneaky here, but I guess we'll have to talk about it next time.
All right. We will talk about it next time. Not in the next episode that's going to come out because that has already been recorded. But episode 150 will be the subsequent episode, our week one recap. If that trade happens then, we will talk about it then.
Oh man, 150 of these bad boys. That's nuts.
Mm, I cannot believe it. Yeah, we really just feels like very recently we put out 100. Now it's halfway to 200.
Yeah, I mean, so I Lexi was very nice to get us trophies for our 100th podcast, and that trophy came in while I was living here in Charlotte. So like that was not that long ago. The longest it could have been is like 18 months ago. And it definitely was not 18 months ago. So it's kind of crazy. Um,
Yeah, it was sometime in the like maybe November of 2022 or something.
yeah, something like that. Um, yeah. Um, Ooh, typing. We might actually have something breaking here. Hold on.
Oh.
You have a deal, baby. Live on the podcast. All right.
Uh-oh. I know you mentioned Jake Berger earlier. Is this going to be Jake Berger? Also, I like from Greg hearing rumors that at least five guys are interested in Berger.
I love how you put it in there then, like even before I put the burger market heating up.
Jake Berger, Chris Paddock, and Robert Gasser. Oh, Dylan Cease. Interesting. I thought you were a Cease hater.
Yeah. Okay, so here's kind of my thoughts here. Uh we'll start with Cease. Cease had like a 2.20 ERA in 2022. Everybody knew that wasn't sustainable. I was hating on him last year because I was like, the hype is way too high. It doesn't make sense for everybody to go out and get him like at that elevated price because there's no way he's going to repeat it. And then last year was absolute dog shit. He had a um what the ERA is like a 4.5 something ERA. Sorry, I'm clearly not ready for this because I wasn't sure if this was going to break. Um, 4.58. But it came with a 372 FIP, of 4.8 xFIP. Like the numbers were better. Um, think and it came with a 330 BABIP, and kind of a uncharacteristically low left on base percentage. So I don't think he's a 220 ERA guy. I don't think he's a 4.58 ERA guy. What I think he is more like a 3.8 ERA guy with like a 120 whip, um, and a boatload of strikeouts. Like he was seventh in baseball last year of pitchers with 140 or more innings and strikeout rate. So even if he does post like a 380 ERA, and even if the whip is slightly high, I think those strikeouts are going to cancel it out. Um, the other thing I really liked, so his move to San Diego, I think, is very beneficial for him. It is a pitcher's park. I think the metrics kind of rank it actually the best place to pitch. I think arguably the Giants might be better, but it's like it was first in whatever metric I read earlier. And that defense behind him is really, really good. I think it's a lot better than the defense he had behind him in Chicago last year. So I'm confident that like the combination of all of that can kind of push the ERA back down a bit. And if he's sitting at a 3.7, 3.8 ERA with all those strikeouts, like he's going to be an asset. Uh, I'm not relying on him to be like my SP1, right? In a world in an ideal world, Cole and Bradish are back by June, and Cease is like my SP6 or SP7. But even now, like I mean, he's still behind Nola and Gallon and Max Fried for me, and he's kind of on that tier there with like Nestor Cortez. Like I'm perfectly fine with him as an SP4, SP5 to start the year. And who knows, maybe I decide to trade him. But because you know me. But um, I think to sum it up, I've been skeptical on him in the past. I'm still a little skeptical, but I think at this price, I think it's pretty reasonable. Jake Berger, I really like Jake Berger. I mean, I gave up a first round pick to go get him, albeit in 2029. I think there's real breakout potential here. I mean, I think he did it last year. I've kind of compared him to Max Muncy and kind of been like, hey, he's my next Max Muncy. But the plate skills are still garbage. I get that he cut down the strikeout rate to kind of end the year, but he doesn't walk a ton. And my concern is that this ends up kind of being like a Hunter Renfroe situation where like he's going to slug 30 plus home runs, but he's going to have like a 290, 300 OBP, which has value, but it is just kind of inevitably limited a bit by that low OBP, also keeping the counting stats down. So, um, plus, I do have some depth. I have Arenado, I have Muncy. I mean, he was my third bench bat, and I do have a couple guys in the minors who I think will be up either on opening day or shortly thereafter, and Colton Cowser and Tyler Black. So I am dealing from a position of strength there. Paddock was somebody I'm intrigued about, but not enough, I think, to kind of commit to him full time to begin the year. But I think he's a really nice add for Connor. Because Connor needs young starting pitching, and if Paddock can develop a third pitch, which he's been working on, like I think he can be a solid rotation option. Robert Gasser is somebody I really really like. I wish I didn't have to give him up. I think he's going to be a solid arm for the Brewers. I don't know if it's quite like top of the rotation arm. I think he's going to be a solid mid rotation arm. I just he has kind of a funky arm delivery. I just, it's a pitching prospect at the end of the day, and just kind of given the position I'm at, I wanted something a little more stable. So, um, bottom line, I think at this price, I think Cease is a good gamble. I think Berger's a really good gamble for Connor. He's still young. He's a former White Sox. He hits for a lot of power. I think the two young pitchers he got are interesting, and I think it's kind of a win-win all around.
Yeah, fair enough. I think he didn't really give up anything that was difficult to give up. I think Cease is solid. Berger, I like Berger, but and I get why Connor wants to bet on him. Um, but yeah, he's not. like a guy who's there yet. Chris Paddock, I don't care about, and Robert Gasser is an interesting starting pitching prospect, but certainly not someone who's difficult to give up. So yeah, you got your guy. You got a starting pitcher now. You've been trying to get one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's weird because I have not made a big trade since like August, right? Again, Josh Hader was the last big trade I made, ironically also from Connor. Um, and like I made some smaller acquisitions this off season. I think this is probably the biggest acquisition I've made in quite some time. So kind of missed that adrenaline rush of making a real deal, but we shall see how this goes for Cease.
All right, we shall see. And speaking of things we'll see on the other side of the break, we have an interview with Jake, the recent acquirer of Ronald Acuña Jr. So talk to you then, and so we will see you on the other side of that.
Yep, see you then.
All right, we are back now with the main reason for this little bonus episode. We have Jake on, fresh off of a trade for Ronald Acuña. We're finally able to get Jake on a very big trade, a lot of moving pieces. But first and foremost, Jake, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks, guys. I've been up for a while. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. for the Dodgers Padres game, so running a little short on sleep, but had to get up for first game of the season.
Yeah, I had the opposite thing here. I thought I was going to be up all day to watch it and then set my alarm for what I thought was 5 minutes before the game at 5:55 a.m. and turns out I set it on 5:55 p.m. So uh I missed most of the game, but I'm glad you got to watch the entire game. And I feel like Cam kind of buried the lead with the second trade too. Not just Acuna again, Spencer Strider too. So why don't we dive in right here? Uh, let's start kind of with the Acuna trade here, and I think this really goes back to the draft with you taking Yamamoto at 2. I guess kind of walk us through the Acuna trade, how that came together.
Or you
Uh,
mean the Strider trade?
Strider trade. Have to do see. Okay, yeah. Other way around. Walk us through the Strider trade first. They're both Braves. It's get them mixed up. Go ahead. Walk us through the Strider trade first.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how the offseason turned out for me. I thought at one point there was a chance I was going to get Wyatt Langford at 2, who I preferred over Yamamoto, but obviously those were like my clear top 2 for a while. So I ended up getting Yamamoto. Assumed he was just going to be, a staple in my rotation for a little while. I generally have not old pitchers, but older, not a ton of good youth. And so it was nice to get, a 25-year-old pretty much ace out of the jump. And then I think it was Zane who reached out to me about Yamamoto. Maybe I reached out about Fred, honestly, I'm not sure. But the main piece was Yamamoto, and then I was gonna have to add. And for me, basically what I've been seeing all off season, just what I've seen with my eyes and just doing research, Strider is the clear number 1 overall pitcher in Dynasty. And that's by a pretty significant margin. It reminds me a little bit a few years ago how everyone was valuing Jacob deGrom, who was already in his early 30s and he could barely pitch half a season. But he was just so dominant during his stretches. For me, Strider, he's shown that he can be somewhat durable, although he has the risks of any pitcher. But he's shown durability. I think he has the talent to be, a 300 strikeout guy year in and year out. And along with that comes low ERA, low WHIP, a lot of quality starts. And so he was someone who I really wanted to acquire, someone who I was happy to upgrade Yamamoto into. And then, the second piece ended up being Matt McLean, who, I really like, but I did have depth in my middle infield, which I don't really anymore, but that's another story. But I was pretty happy that he was the second piece, and you know, Marcelo Mayer in the first round pick. I don't view either of them as, a real top 20 to 30 prospect. Mayer has really fallen down boards since last year, which was a bit shaky. And then from what I've seen, the first round next year isn't supposed to be great. And it's my pick, so it will be in the back of the round. So I was happy moving all of that and consolidating pieces in Strider. And then I assumed my offseason was pretty much done. I made my one big Braves acquisition. And then Ruthvik was very intent on moving Acuña, which I really did not think he was going to move him unless he got, multiple top 10 players or anything. We can go through that package a little bit later. I don't know if you want to touch on Strider more. But yeah, very eventful offseason.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, just to finish on Strider, that really felt like we were talking with Zane, kind of a win-win deal. Obviously, um, yeah, for Zane, packaging Strider into a starting pitcher like Yamamoto plus a few other really solid pieces, is great. But for you getting Strider and getting a lot of pieces which are, I guess, from your perspective, not the most necessary, a little bit more expendable for you. And yeah, maybe the depth is something we can talk about later. But yeah,
Yeah,
no, definitely a very interesting deal that feels like a win-win.
yeah, I see Yamamoto's upside, like the his ceiling as being Strider, and I wouldn't say it's super likely that he, reaches his full ceiling. So I would rather just take the known asset and give up McLean, who had a great rookie season, but steals are becoming less valuable, and so I was okay giving up some steals. His peripherals, while they were still good, he exceeded them a bit. It reminds me a little bit of when I traded Jeremy Pena after his really good rookie year, and turned him into Corey Seager. Um, I view McLean as more valuable than Pena at the time, but to get someone like Strider, I really couldn't pass up the opportunity.
hmm yeah, absolutely. But yes, let's move on now to the big one. Yeah, Ruthvik traded you Acuna, Ryan McMahon, and Cutter Crawford
Mhm.
um, for Kyle Tucker, Bo Bichette, Jesus Luzardo, Seth Lugo, and Adele Amador. So um, I guess to back up, there were five teams making offers for Acuna at the start. Yours at the beginning seemed to be the least serious offer, but you kind of kept adding more and more to it until you put together something very impressive. Why don't you talk through, I guess, how that happened? Were you serious about Acuna from the beginning, and I guess what went down here?
Yeah. And I actually think I had a pretty similar message to Sahil about Tatis, where I said, is there any way I get him without including Tucker or Jordan Alvarez? And I did not think I was gonna be able to get Acuna without including one of the two. Although for a while it looked like a pack the deal was more of a package of Michael Harris, Evan Carter, and probably Luis Castillo, which I was a little bit uneasy about. Um, and not even because I didn't think the value was there, but just for my team needs. Like I didn't think it was smart for me to lose a true ace like Luis Castillo, and I think Kevin Gosman's name was tossed out there too, but I think Castillo would have been the starting pitcher that had to go. And so once Ruthvik told me that Sahil was including Tatis in his trade offer, I said, okay, like I need to include Tucker. I love Tucker. I think, he's a top 10 dynasty guy, but he's not Acuna. If you even just compare the stats, like Acuna might add 10 homers, 30 stolen bases, 50 points of on base. There's a significant gap even between Acuna and the other top guys in the league. Um, and while, Acuna had his real big breakout year last year, I think he'll be able to somewhat replicate those numbers. If you even just look at the projections, they're miles ahead of anyone else in terms of just, the six stats across the board. And so I was comfortable including Kyle Tucker as long as, it wasn't Tucker and Harris and Carter, something crazy like that. Bo Bichette was the next piece that I tossed out as because I thought it was going to have to be Tucker plus either Harris or Carter. Um, so when I threw Bichette's name out there, Ruthvik said he might be okay with him as a second piece as long as there were other pieces involved. And with Bichette, um, you know, when I took over this team, he was pretty much a top 10, 15 dynasty guy. But at this point, he's transformed into more of a high floor, low ceiling player, which is very valuable for a team that's looking to build depth. But for me, I'm in the position where I feel like I have enough assets to consolidate them into the real top players in the league, like Acuña. And so Bichette, although my team was named after him, a lot of sentimental value. He was someone I was comfortable moving in a deal for the number one player in Dynasty. Jesus Luzardo was next, and again, great starting pitcher. I'd probably look at him as around starting pitcher number 20 overall in Dynasty. But again, he's not the Strider, Gosman, Castillo of my rotation. I felt like I had the depth there as well to move him. And then Amador was the one prospect that Ruthvik wanted. He was asking between Amador and Kobe Mayo. I was hesitant to move Mayo, but it turned out that he was fine with Amador. And then coming back just to fill depth, I was happy with Ryan McMahon. He's going to be able to platoon for me. Basically, I'll play him when he hits at home, and I won't play him when he's on the road. And then Cutter Crawford, a lot of people are high on him this year. I was looking to try to get Nick Pivetta instead, but Ruthvik didn't see Luzardo as a huge upgrade over Pivetta, and so I was happy to get Crawford back. I think he can be a top 40 to 50 starting pitcher this year, which is very valuable if he's my eighth best starting pitcher. Overall, I'm happy consolidating these top assets into Acuña because while it does come with risk, I feel like I can build my team more with younger assets, develop more into my team and grow those assets and try to consolidate more and get those top guys. I feel like Sahil has done that very well with his team, and to compete in the future, I felt like I was going to have to do that and make those tough decisions.
I agree with a lot of that. I think you did a good job consolidating. I think these are all pretty solid value. I know Cam and I however Cam and I structure these episodes here, because Cam and I are going to talk about these trades ourselves. We'll have a lot more to say about it then. So we're recording this one first, so I'm not going to spoil all my thoughts here, but definitely very solid trades. I think you're right. Consolidating depth is always a good thing, and hard to beat getting a number one pitcher and the number one hitter in the league. So it's definitely going to be a fun season for you. I'm sure watching those guys and knowing that you own them. So sure you'll be watching a lot more Braves games this year.
I'll have to watch a lot of Braves games. I was catching Michael Harris batting ninth last year for a while, but it'll be nice to have Acuña and Strider in there. And Strider added a curveball, and I don't know if you've seen his spring training stats. I don't know exactly what they are, but he's basically the best pitcher in baseball, like by far. Let me see if I can hold him up real quick. But I think it was something like 20 innings, 40 strikeouts, like under 1 ERA. He has, I think, has added a nasty pitch and become even better than he was last year, where he underperformed his peripherals. And so I'm excited to watch him pitch, and I think that his value is just going to keep skyrocketing. I don't know the mechanics behind some of those like top paid fantasy baseball leagues, but I've seen in a lot of those big drafts that Acuña and Strider go 1 and 2. So that is nice to see as well.
Man, yeah, imagine getting the number one and number two guys in one off season. You've coming off of 2 titles, really put your best foot forward, trying to repeat here. Any concerns? Yeah, your depth looks like it's still pretty solid here. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Ryan McMahon for this year, but even guys like your depth guys, Edward Julian and Jack Sawinski, I think are guys, decent guys to bank on for this year. So it
Yeah, I
really
mean,
feels, yeah, like he got something here.
I'm very high on Julian. He was part of the reason why I moved McLean. Not as much Bichette, but I do feel comfortable with him at second. And then I just needed a shortstop to fill in while Corey Seager's out, and so I felt like the Jorge Polanco over JP Crawford trade was pretty fair. Again with McMahon, I think I'll probably sit him when he's away, and so I think he can be honestly a pretty good hitter when he's in Colorado. My outfield is still extremely strong. I didn't have to lose multiple outfielders, and so I feel like I haven't been at a point with my team where I have a legit starting five outfielders. I've been kind of building piece by piece. I mean, I remember there was a point where, like Marcelo Zuna was my top outfielder, and so I've really been able to add the pieces there, which is nice because it is hard to find five quality starting outfielders. Um, Sawinski and Alejandro Kirk were pieces I picked up during the whole roster crunch. I think they can both be helpful bats off the bench for me. Um, and yeah, I'll see if any of my bats come up from the minors this year. I think I was more confident in prior years for that happening. I think Owen Casey on the Cubs, he might come up mid-year, but I'm not counting on my minor leaguers too much for this year. And back to the point, again, Sahil, met him in the finals last year. For a while, I felt like he has had the better roster, and not that I got lucky necessarily in the finals, but I didn't think I was going to be able to repeat my performance. Now I feel like I do have a roster that can compete with him pretty much any week. And so, when you have a team like Sahel coming into the league, it drives you to build those pieces even quicker. And so maybe this is more of Sahel's creation than mine to compete with him. But
I'm sure Sahil, you love to hear that.
Uh,
It's your fault.
Yes and no. I do love to hear all the compliments. I don't love as much that it motivated you to go out and get the top two players. I would have liked to have not free to not have acquired them. But yeah, it definitely makes the competition more interesting this year. Cam and I did power rankings. I don't know what part of this episode it comes in, but spoiler alert, I mean, we're the top two teams in those power rankings. Like I think there's a pretty easy tier there. And I'm excited for our battles again this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, I will say too, I was trying to trade for Nick Pavetta from Ruthvik. Wasn't able to get him. I think he's holding on to him for now. But I would have loved that rotation, just a couple studs and then the entire Red Sox rotation. Because I already have Brian Bayo, Cutter Crawford, and Garrett Whitlock. So it could go horribly wrong at the bottom of my rotation, but you know, if it hits, then I'm happy as a fan, happy as a fantasy manager. So rooting for the latter there.
Yeah, speaking of battles between the two of you, um, we are coming to the end of the inaugural Gallardo Cup Dynasty season. And just like in our power rankings in this league, I'm a very distant third to your top two. Um, and one of you is going to win the Gallardo Cup Dynasty League for the first time. How are you both feeling?
Sahil, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Ruthvik and I had a conversation on Monday about this, and our basketball team's been playing really well recently. I think, let's see, I could count it out here quickly. We won nine of our last 10 going into the playoffs. We kind of had a slow start, but picked up momentum fast. And then in hockey as well, we've been playing really well. So I think we have a bye this week, if I remember correctly. Shout out to Ruthvik because he's really been the one who's been running the basketball and hockey teams. So he's been making all the decisions that have gotten both of those teams up until this point. I haven't had nearly as much had not put nearly as much time or effort into either of those teams. So I'm confident in Ruthvik's abilities to just kind of keep rolling in those leagues, and hopefully it ends up well. I mean, I think we're feeling pretty good about our chances. I mean, that being said, I mean, when it's coming down to 1 week matchups here, anything can happen. And I think it's always a little tough to um, get too confident one way or another. So I am cautiously optimistic, I think is the way I'd phrase it.
Yeah, I'm very happy that this is coming down to such a close finals because like starting the league, I wasn't sure whether you'd have some runaway team and then they miss the playoffs in basketball, make the playoffs in hockey, finish third, and they still win the league. Like that wouldn't be very exciting. Right now we have the top two teams by far. We're both in the semifinals of the last two sports. 1 week away from each other, and it could literally come down to the hockey finals. So that's really exciting. I'm curious to see if that happens in future years as well. Basketball, I was a little bit nervous, but I'm feeling very good looking at our team's performance so far this week and seeing that Team Brown has a chance to lose this week in basketball. So that could cut the gap right now because we're down 2 spots overall. So essentially, I think we'll have the tiebreaker because we beat you a ton in baseball, and the rest of the sports have been pretty even in the head-to-head matchups.
You do have the
So as long
tiebreaker.
as
We calculated that already.
yeah, so as long as it could come down to us winning the basketball finals over you and winning the hockey finals over you to tie in the overall standings and then win with the tiebreaker. Um, I hope it doesn't have to come down to that, although it would be exciting. I hope we can just win basketball this week. You guys lose basketball. We get the spots right there. You lose hockey, and it's done. Um, Hockey, I'm a little nervous. Our goalies have not been playing well whatsoever. I think that's going to be on Ratner to do some streaming because it for a while we were really trying to dump a goalie, and then we didn't know who to drop. So that's been a bit of a struggle. So I'm hoping we just, take a couple spots in basketball and we won't have to worry about hockey as much. But either way, I think it will be a very exciting finish. And I am excited to win the actual Gallardo Cup that I know, Cam, you were designing at the beginning of
Yeah, no, I've
the
mocked it up, and I think I'll leave it to the individual teams for how they want their version of the cup to look, because I know there was a lot of disagreement on, I guess, the placement of the Gallardo logo and whether they wanted their team name or the previous winners on the side. So I could just maybe it'll be a different version every year. So leave it up to the
Yeah,
teams, I
that would I
suppose.
know that would instantly become my most used mug in the apartment.
Oh, absolutely. Um, it is a beautiful, beautiful looking cup.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say you should
but
pursue a career in graphic design.
graphic design is my passion. Um, all right. Yeah. Lastly, real quick, back to your baseball team, Jake. One question I wanted to ask, Jordan Ledger. I noticed you added him last week. I have never heard this name before. He does not
Hmm.
have a picture on ESPN,
Yep.
but he's looked pretty good in this spring. Give us your quick scouting report on him.
My scouting report is that I saw a couple tweets that he's thrown like 5 scoreless innings in spring training and has a chance to be the White Sox closer. And so speculatively, I added him because I absolutely killed my depth with the Strider and Acuña trades, and I had room to add some nobody. And so maybe Leisure can become the closer out of the gate for the White Sox. I know Crochet's starting opening day. I have no idea what's going on with that franchise. But I think a lot of the closing jobs are filled. Also, part of it, I had injuries. Matt Brash is out for a little while. Devin Williams is out at least a few months. So I want to take the upside swings with my relievers. I do have Mason Miller, who I feel very confident in to be the A's closer. But at the same time, who knows how many games the A's are going to win. So I think he has a chance to become the closer, and if not, I'll drop him, you know, third day of the season and pick up someone else and try to get another closer into that bullpen.
Fair enough. But yeah,
Especially
Sahil,
because
any
Sahil
yeah.
took. Oh yeah, Sahil took my Astros closer.
Oh, yeah, Josh Hader. Yeah, honestly, I was rooting for him to land there for that exact reason. I was hoping I would knock Presley out of the role. And I
Yeah,
mean, obviously they're a very good team, and so lots of save opportunities. But that Astros bullpen is going to be fun for both of us, I guess, between Hader, Abreu, and Presley, also combining to own all three. But yeah, no, Cam, I don't have anything else. I think um, yeah, best of luck this season, Jake. We're gonna have some more fun battles here. Hopefully we're meeting in the finals again. And yeah, best of luck in Gallardo too. It's a wild ending, and it is crazy how many times now that you and I seem to find ourselves playing each other in finals matchups, whether it was Dynasty baseball, Gallardo baseball, and maybe Gallardo basketball and Gallardo hockey. So we'll see how that goes.
yeah, it's been a great rivalry, and I think this is just the next chapter.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and yeah, we'll have you on again, hopefully sometime in the near future.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
That's no crime, 'cause you got a body, I got a body. Let's have a party, mi casa, su casa. I got a body, and you got a body. Let's have a party, mi casa, su casa. It's 5:15, yeah, and it's them that light aside, yeah. Said we don't have a ride yet, so let's get one.
This podcast is good.